from. So right now I'm going to kind of turn it over to them and let them explain the presentation and what they're all about. And then I'll be here. Again, there's only a couple people in the room. They're back far for you guys, so it's probably hard to even see them. If there are questions, we're just going to interrupt. So feel free to just yell something. So, and those people online, I guess your mics are off, so you have to use the chat box. I'll kind of keep an eye on the chat box as well if there are questions that pop up. And at that point, we'll turn it over to Elizabeth and Rana, and they can introduce themselves and explain what's going on today.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming this early in the morning. As Mr. Holman said, I'm Elizabeth Liu, and
I'm Rada Parikh.
Yeah, and we're two rising juniors from Beechwood High School. And today we will be talking about how we took learning from the classroom to the community level through our club at the high school called Bison Buddies. So first, we're going to talk about what Bison Buddies is. Basically, it's a club where high school volunteers are able to go down to the middle school and assist students there that are in need of help or are maybe struggling with their work a little bit, and kind of provide guidance to those students and extra help out of the classroom. And also the secondary aspect that we've been working on throughout the past few years is introducing some social awareness programs where we're, like, for example, we're going to be talking about this a little bit later in the presentation, but for example, we hosted a fundraiser for St. Baldrick's Day, which is a program which fundraises for kids with cancer. So yeah, and also just to note about Pear Deck, after each slide, after we finish, we're going to say something like, okay, is there questions? Or we're going to say, oh, okay, we're finished with this slide. We're going to go to the next slide now. And that's just kind of a note for you guys that if you guys are working on notes, that it should be time to kind of finish up because we'll be changing slides. All right. Rada, feel free to move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is our website. It's built through Weebly, so you can view it by either scanning the QR code, clicking the link, and I think we're going to give you a few minutes to just explore on your own and take a look. Yeah, let us know if you guys are having any problems with the link.
Everybody in here's got the link, so I think we're giving just a minute to kind of preview what they're going to talk about. So you can kind of get a sense of where it's at, where we're going. So we'll just give you a minute or two to sort of preview what's there. Almost. So. I think they've had enough time here looking, so if you guys are ready to roll, at least it gives them an exposure of kind of what you're going to talk about over the next few slides and explain to them.
Okay, we're gonna go to the next slide now.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about what our vision is with this program. So we started off by kind of recognizing the struggle for teachers and administrators, where we kind of see them trying to architect school in a way that is challenging for students but not overwhelming. And after the pandemic, a lot of those standard metrics got appended, and there were a lot more students who were overwhelmed by the content. And that's partly due to the fact that a lot of their fundamentals were not as strong to be able to forge ahead. So, as mentors and tutors, we kind of face this dilemma of, do we go back and teach things from the past grades, which will obviously take time, or do we just keep forging ahead? But overall, our vision, of course, is to ensure that no one gets left behind and that we can bring everyone back to speed. But even if we are unable to help these kids reach the academic standards they need to be at, our primary goal is to at least show them the value of education and ensure that they're lifelong learners and that they have the tools to succeed independently. And one of our priorities is to ensure that they are able to articulate their own thoughts and opinions and that they question everything that they encounter. And through this process, we're really grateful to be able to create these lifelong relationships between our mentors and the students. And for high school students, our vision is to ensure that we're equipping them with the real world skills of teaching and creating new ideas and being able to communicate. So I'll just give maybe a few seconds to write down your last thoughts.
Okay, so the leadership of Bison Buddies is made up of the executive board, and then recently we added on the deputy exec board. So the exec board is made up of 4 members, and we all have kind of a unique part in leading the club. So Rada and I do the majority of the planning, and of course, everyone helps, but Eliana and Sophia are more focused on the social media and club promotion aspects. And then recently we added on the deputy exec board, which is kind of the next generation. Well, we're building it up to be kind of the next generation of club leaders that can step in after we graduate. And we formed this deputy exec board through an interview process, and that led to us having 3 members. And recently we had a kind of team bonding experience at the local food bank. Okay, Rada, you can move on to the next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our mission. So one big aspect is how after the pandemic, where there was a lot of kind of isolation and everyone not really feeling like a community, something that we're working on is just bringing the community together in a group in this club, supporting the students who at the middle school and also supporting those social awareness events. And then, of course, another big aspect is assisting the younger students. And as Rada mentioned, there were a lot, like a spike in students kind of falling behind in their studies after the pandemic. So that's really something that we've we're trying to assist with. And then also just building those peer-to-peer learning connections where the younger students can have someone from the high school that they can look up to, who they know have gone through the same experiences that they're going through in the present day. Next slide.
And now I'll talk a little bit about what our inspiration is behind this. So in the meanwhile, if you want to kind of answer this question about what the difference between inspiration and motivation is, you can feel free to do so. So to me, inspiration versus motivation are like two different things. So I see inspiration as something that's more profound and that it becomes an intrinsic part of you, whereas motivation keeps that inspiration keep on going, but it might not be as constant. So kind of to give an analogy for that, if inspiration is the seed, then motivation is the water, the air, and the sunlight that keeps it alive. So for in our case, our inspiration undoubtedly comes from Mr. Holman's classroom, where we didn't just learn what it means to be a student, but we were also perpetually asked, what type of human being do we want to be? What type of legacy do we want to leave behind? And I think it was in his classroom that I started to develop a genuine interest about things outside my own bubble. And kind of from learning about the world, I started caring about the world, and then looking for ways to translate that compassion and empathy into tangible action, which is definitely something that's going to stick with us forever. And I also think it was in his classroom that I understood this ultimate human pursuit of finding ourselves, learning about our world, and finding our place in our world. So, really, at Bison Buddies, we want to pay forward this philosophy. We want to sow seeds in a garden that we probably won't be there to see, but we still want to do it because we realize that that's our legacy. And our motivation to keep on doing this is definitely the students we work with. It's their smiles, their aspirations, and being able to witness the tremendous growth that we see in an entire year. And it's also the encouragement that we get from so many teachers and parents that really keeps us going. So just like we will definitely remember Mr. Holman's name like 40, 50 years down the lane, we hope that we can be the person that will be remembered by the students that we can reach out to today. So, who are we, like, what population are we trying to benefit by doing this program? So, a lot of the students enrolled are recommended by teachers or guidance counselors, but also we have students who have an interest and drive to just learn ahead and refine their skills. So, sometimes that can be a challenge of how do we want to distribute our resources because we have a limited pool of mentors and tutors. So that's something we'll talk about later. But overall, our goal is just to encourage healthy intellectual debate with any student at any level of learning. So Elizabeth will talk about that enrollment process now.
Okay, before we talk about enrollment, let's answer the question that's been put in the chat. So the question is this club done after or before school, and how long is each tutoring session? Also, do meetings go year-round once school starts, and do meetings occur 5 days a week, or are they on a rotating schedule? So to answer your question, it's really dependent on how we can fit into the schedule of the new year. We've just gotten like a schedule change for next year that's completely different from last year, so that's something that we'll have to figure out. But it's kind of something that's just dependent on when it works and when we can put it into the day. But just to kind of give you a glimpse of how we did it last year, we did it all last school, after school. And it was like about 25-minute sessions, and it was year round, although it did start kind of late in the year, in I think September or late September maybe. And yeah, and they were occurring on 3 days of the week, just based on how the schedule worked.
Can I interrupt there? So this is Garth Coleman. Couple of quick things. Our high school and middle school are on campus. So our high school is about a 5-minute walk from the middle school. The high school ended earlier than we did. So the high school kids got out and they have what was called an academy period. That's a period the kids can go to see a teacher for help, but they don't have to stay at the building. Many of the Bison Buddies would leave the high school, walk to the middle school, and that was our advisory period. It just so happened they felt time-wise the same. So the Bison Buddies kids, and they'll probably get to this more, the middle school kids would go to the library, and that was like the designated area for the Bison Buddies, and the high school kids would come down. So we had it built sort of in. As they mentioned, the middle school is changing our schedule. We were starting school at 8:30, which meant that kids were leaving classes to go to sports because some of our sports programs changed. We are now moving school back to 7:45 next year. So we're making a total time change there. So for the high school kids, that now means they're coming in early. That's when our advisory period will be. We're also talking about, we house the teaching profession consortium is at Beechwood High School. So we're talking a little bit about how can we make that part of the class potentially, so that those kids that want to be in education should be able to find a way. So to answer your question, last year we did it multiple days after the high school kids' day in, but during the middle school day. We're not sure how that's going to play out this year. We're also looking at the potential of virtual tutoring, seeing how that might potentially play out because so many of our students are in sports or in other programs that they don't have a tutor. So that's a work in progress, soon to be determined, we hope. Sorry, guys, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so now to talk a little bit about the enrollment. First, a question that you could ask yourself while we talk is, what methods do you think we should use? Or if there was a club at kind of your school, what clubs do you think they should use to enroll students? So first, we have the parental enrollment form. It's the link on the left. And basically, we went down to the middle school during the parent-teacher conference and set up a table. And in between classes, parents could come visit us at the table and kind of discuss the program and sign up their kid or take a picture of the QR code. And then on the right side is the student enrollment form. And we went down to the middle school for a presentation to the middle schoolers, and also the principal, I think, did a presentation separate from that. But one problem with this form was that it didn't really work because of a miscommunication between us and the middle schoolers. So there was a bit of confusion about what the club was actually about. Some of the middle schoolers actually thought they would be the ones tutoring. So, and then also, with the parental enrollment form, we never really got to it because we were focused on the teacher recommendation aspect. So that was kind of, those two aspects are definitely something that we want to work on next year, and we'll explain a little bit about why later on. And then with the teacher recommendation, that's what we mostly focused on throughout the year, but there was a problem that that some of the students were kind of just despondent and completely unenthusiastic about participating in the program. They really did not want to be there. And also, some of the teachers didn't get back to us. So mostly our recommendations were made up of 7th grade students, since the 7th grade team is led by Mr. Holman. And then the 8th graders and 6th graders kind of trickled in. And by that time, a lot of high school students had lost interest in participating in the club, which we will also discuss later. So next year, we're trying to pursue more of the student enrollment and the parent enrollment aspect, just to make sure we have students who want to learn and are willing to try to improve themselves, rather than students who are just going to be completely like despondent and not want to participate. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next slide.
I'm gonna add one more comment. The parents that did send in, a lot of them wanted just someone for their kid to talk with.
Yes.
High schooler to be like an emotional support, just meet with the kid, talk. There were specific requests for like a Spanish tutor, like my kid's struggling in Spanish, I need somebody there. Advanced, we got a couple kids in advanced science that need help. So there were specific requests from parents. But again, a lot of that seemed to be more the emotional side. Like my kid just needs somebody to talk to, they're struggling. we want more men or not, just somebody to talk to the kid wants vacation. That I think is gonna have to be a much bigger focus this year for us. Because I'm sure in your school too, there's a lot of after effects of the pandemic and how that's playing out on kids, and they lost social time. So at least me as a teacher, it seems like seventh graders are more like fifth graders now than they are seventh graders. So it's a little emotional development's not there, and they're struggling with like, how do you do school? It seems to be all of a sudden a problem we didn't have to face 5 years ago. But now we're like, wait, school is this way. You're not on a screen, you hide and go. So I think that's going to be another focus as we move forward. So I apologize again, girls.
Okay, so I'll just talk a little bit about how the mentoring and tutoring system is structured. So we started off by something called the dual system, where we had mentors and tutors, and a mentor would be paired with one student for an entire year, and they would help them with all their academics and any emotional support that they needed as well. Whereas we had tutors who had kind of a more temporary and flexible role, where they could go down to the middle school on whichever day they wanted and help whichever student needed help at that time. Um, and this option was preferred by a lot of our high schoolers since they have busy schedules, and sometimes committing to coming twice a week can be difficult for them. But just with the way that our administration kind of responded to the program, we had to change some things around, where our mentors would have the same role, but our tutors would also be paired with only one student. However, they would be only working on one subject with that student. So the original type of structure that we had would probably work with a larger school with more resources, and it's definitely something that's very appealing to the high school students. So one of the challenges that our mentors face is, by focusing on everything, are they really able to achieve anything? And this is definitely something we want to try to address next year, about what the focus of these sessions should be, whether that be working on specific assignments, or just talking to students, or just helping them develop better study habits and better ways of preparing for tests, etc. Okay, so I just see some responses or some people taking notes, so we can wait for a minute and then move on.
Do you guys have any questions?
Did the mentors or tutors go through any training?
They want to know about mentor and tutor training. How did you guys handle that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, at the beginning of the year, we take a survey of all the students who are interested in becoming mentors or tutors, and we ask them what classes they had taken at the middle school, since we have a variety of advanced and normal level classes, as well as some high school courses like honors biology, algebra, geometry, etc. Just so we know that we're pairing them with a student that they're actually able to help. And then also, we'll talk about this a little later, but on our website, we have a resource page that has resources for every classroom, and our mentors and tutors can access those. And in addition, we also have a page on our website with past projects and work that's actually been done in the class by other students, so that mentors and tutors can refer to what project guidelines look like, what a complete project or a paper or assignment would actually look like. So we are currently working on developing that database, so our mentors and tutors have access to sort of those training materials.
Yeah, and then we also asked the mentors and tutors which subjects they would be most comfortable, most confident in kind of tutoring or like teaching. And then also at the beginning of the year during our interest meeting, we had kind of a short section with like training materials and like the mindset that those high school volunteers should be in when they're kind of helping those students. And yeah.
Just another quick question about how many high school students showed interest.
Yeah, so this is something, okay, so Rada, if you can move on to the next slide, actually. So at the beginning of the year, we had 52 members that actually showed interest and came to the interest meeting and filled out the Google form with all their information, contact information, schooling experience, and like what they would be interested in. But then since we had a really kind of slow start to the year and we didn't really get those teacher recommendations very quickly, we only had actually 38 people paired and actually going down to the middle school at least one time. And then by the end of the year, only a handful of students were actually consistently going. So that was kind of a downside of our experience last year and something that we hope will improve next year by starting the club earlier and getting those students committed early on and forming that bond between the volunteer and the student from the middle school so that they'll kind of have an incentive to continue helping that student. And also just an MCQ question. Does your school have an existing program like ours? So Rada, I think you can show the responses. Okay.
So you have a frame, I think there's a framework here you can kind of look at. What the other piece is that 50 some odd kids, they said, the graduating classes at Beechwood are around 118, 119. So you're talking about a total population of about 500 kids. That's a lot that we're interested in helping out. As they mentioned, there was a really slow process at the beginning of the year with, I'm just going to call it chaos. A lot of internal chaos at the district level, trying to figure out times and schedules. Nobody was really in control of the program at either building. So it was like the principals want it done, but nobody was in charge, you know what I mean? So that became an issue. We did move I'm going to take on this leadership role this year at the middle school because there wasn't any. So it was kind of being run from the high school, but there was nobody at the middle school who was the contact. That became a problem because there was just not a good communication and overlap. So I would say you need probably 2 people, one at the high school that's kind of coordinating and one at the middle school, that those 2 can keep in contact and go. When we left it to administrators, it was like one administrator would say yes, but we wouldn't hear from the other. Or not that anybody was at fault, it's just the chaos of school, so there wasn't there was no ownership at the middle school, if that makes sense. And guys, we have about 15 minutes, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, so I'll just briefly talk about kind of how we led that communication, and Mr. Holman touched upon that a little bit. So our club leaders obviously talked to our club members, and that process took place mostly through just text message and email, and they reminded them of events. They individually one-on-one encouraged them. We took note of their volunteer hours, and we asked them for their suggestions on ways that they thought we could improve the program. And the mentors talked to students either in person, through email, or through text, and they checked in with them usually live during the sessions, and we encouraged the students that they were teaching to email them any questions they had after the session, and our mentors usually got back to them with resources and kind of helped them walk their way through any problems that they were having. And then the mentors also updated teachers and parents of any progress that was being made, and we'll talk a little bit about progress reports and how we utilize those. And we also communicated with teachers and parents about any challenges that we were having during these sessions.
Okay.
So we have a question in the responses, and they asked, were there any incentives for participants? So for our mentors and tutors, we gave them volunteer hours by doing this, and obviously it's a great thing for them to talk about in any other outside of school programs that they do or when applying for college. So that was kind of the incentive.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons. So, first, we have established 3 20-minute meeting sessions per week, but hopefully next year we can establish longer sessions since 20 minutes is really kind of difficult to get anything done.
Yeah. And then also we realized that Mr. Holman talked about this, it's difficult to reach the administration. So something we've done to hopefully smoothen that process is have a middle school advisor, have Mr. Holman kind of help us and guide us through any challenges that we have.
Yeah, and then as we mentioned, we have established a location in the middle school library. However, there are limited seats in the environment, so if there's a greater amount of students, it might get loud and it might get like seats might get filled, so there might not be any space.
Yeah, and then something we're also going to work a little bit more on this year is talking to the principals, talking to administration, and kind of being able to sell our idea so that they want to give attention and resources to making a lot of our ideas possible.
Okay, so then on the pro side, there are some kids that are happy and able to develop those long-term relationships. A few of the members of the deputy exec board actually, and also just in general, other people in the club have actually been partnered with the same kid for throughout the entire year. And I know of people who, even during finals week, they were going down to the middle school and still helping those students, which is
Yeah.
really great to see.
hmm And then on the flip side, we do have some kids who aren't so responsive to the help that they're getting. So that's something we're going to look at next year of which kids are going to be our targeted stakeholders and how will we be able to get actual results and be able to help them.
Okay, and then the last pro, there is flexibility, and the sessions are kind of free to go to throughout the week. However, it makes it difficult to establish routine and discipline since if a student just decides, oh, I'm tired today, I have a test tomorrow, I don't feel like going, we can't really enforce it.
Yeah, and then as we've mentioned, we did lose some high school volunteers throughout the year. So something we'll talk about a little later in the slideshow is how do we maintain a strong number of mentors and tutors.
Yeah, and then I just want to note on this slide, the picture to the right is from my inbox actually. And as you can see, we definitely generate a lot of emails for communicating with club members, as Rada mentioned, and admin and the teachers. So it's just a lot of communication involved. Okay, so now we're going to talk a bit about progress reports. Next slide. Okay, so this is the blank sheet, and just looking at the top, that's basically where the student puts their personal. By the way, this is for the high school volunteers to fill out, not the middle schoolers. But at the top, it's just filling out the student information, and then the second part in the middle is the volunteer tracking information. That's where you're putting down all the dates that you kind of volunteered, and then at the end of the year we compiled it into a spreadsheet and sent that spreadsheet to the counseling office for those hours to be logged. And then for the progress report section, Rada, go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, so the biggest part of the progress report section is the notes. So that's where you put the roses, buds, and weeds. So what are those roses, buds, and weeds? So as you can see with this example right here, after each session, the high school volunteer kind of jots down what they worked on and what the student is, first of all, the roses, or what the student is excelling at, and the buds are what they're improving at and what they need a little bit of work with, but that it's really kind of not to the point of excelling, but they're doing pretty well. And then with the weeds, it's kind of what they're really struggling with and what really needs to be worked on and improved. So yeah. And then next, we're going to talk about the resources page on our website. So you can go ahead and click on the link and to view that page. I think you can go to the next slide.
Okay, so this is an example of one of the pages within our resource page, and you can access that by clicking the middle school social studies and specifically the 7th grade page. So as you can see, there's a lot of different websites on a lot of different topics, and those topics are derived from the Ohio State standards. And essentially, this is kind of our way of facilitating the research process when students are working on projects or learning about something or doing an assignment. We realize that sometimes Google can be kind of daunting and even more so looking for scholarly articles. So this is something that's work in progress. We haven't completed it for all the grade levels and all the subjects. And we are also finding ways to collaborate with teachers as they know what resources are most helpful in their classroom. But the idea of this is for us to smoothen the process of accessing content so that we can maximize the time dedicated to actually learning and critically analyzing content. So this is a question we have for you. Do you have a database of student projects in your school? So you can feel free to click on this and kind of explore what we have there. Essentially, it is a thing link which has many different student projects, and throughout that website page, you'll see different student projects. And the purpose of this is to kind of show this idea of autonomy in learning, where students can use their own passions and what they're interested in and connect that to what they're learning in the classroom. And by having this type of database, we encourage peer to peer motivation and develop this sort of healthy competition, and we're also able to record and maintain the progress of students. And most importantly, students are able to see themselves enter this community of learners, which can be really empowering. And this page is only accessible to our tutors and mentors so that they can see what some of the project guidelines are, what a final product would look like. But in our school, we do have an entire wall dedicated to students' legacy projects. So, projects that are really inspiring, and all students, the middle schoolers as well, have access to all of those projects and can view them at any time. And so, we can just look at the responses really quick.
Okay. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about the Book Nook section of the website. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the website, and we worked really long on this. So basically, it's a book database that covers grades 3 to 8, and it's all separated into separate genres. And these are just some of the books that we really enjoyed in our time at the middle school or also in the elementary school. And the Amazon links are linked. And the selection ranges from Dogman and Roald Dahl for 3rd graders to All the President's Men and 3 Minutes to Doomsday for 8th graders. So personally, those two books were two books that I really enjoyed during my 8th grade time. So we put those on the website. And then next slide. Okay, so this is where we put on the left is the top of the page, but basically it's where students can access books, reading material, news, and think tanks. So just to list off some of the examples on there, the New York Times, and for finding books, Libby, Sora, and think tanks, I think Pew's on there, and a few others. So, and then on the right, as you can see, it's our media bias chart. So it's trying to just keep in mind and serve as a reminder to students about the kind of biases out there and what they need to pay attention to and keep in mind while they're reading through material.
I'm not sure if you guys found that one, if you're looking at the links, that when you go to the resource page.
It's on the resource page, and it's one of the, yeah.
And there are tutorials for each software. So if they're looking at Libby, how to use it, there's tutorial built there as well. And so there's all that kind of, again, I would say a massive amount of materials built onto this website, created by kids to younger kids to access certain things. So you, as a seventh grade social studies teacher, I see a lot of the kids, this is a bookmark site, even if they're not device to device. Because there's so many resources there that they can go to. And I don't know, I don't want to speak out of turn. I know we're almost out of time. It seems like parents use the book the most, right? Because they're always asking, what can my kid read? And we're like, well, here's some examples, here's some links. So, and with the links directly to Amazon, parents can immediately buy them, the books there, you know what I mean? So that's been, I think, helpful. I've used that with even parents who's contacted me for what are some resources. I can send them this link, and here's quick resources that you have access to that kids have picked, and some teacher areas. But is there a kid?
Okay, so here is, we're going to talk about community outreach. So the social awareness programs that we mentioned at the beginning. So first of all, I think that's response, but think about what types of community outreach programs you have and feel free to write them down in the response page. But that while you're typing, I'm going to describe the picture right there and what we're doing. So during the fundraiser that we mentioned for St. Baldrick's Day, which is the fundraising for kids cancer, we set up a kind of bake sale, and this is just the members of the executive board and then some of the DEB members who were assisting with that fundraiser.
Again, about 2 minutes, so you're gonna have to go very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just talk about kind of how that process rolled out. So on this page, you can, on this big picture over here is kind of an article that we wrote that recorded our experience and how we went about organizing it. So if you click on that, you can access it, and we sent it to our local magazine, the Beechwood Buzz, for it to be published. And kind of at the end of the month, after we collected all the money, we culminated it by going down to university hospitals at Rainbow Babies and donating our hair for kids who are going through chemo so wigs could be made out of it. So that was a really great experience. And as Elizabeth mentioned, we have great ideas similar to this in mind for this year, including having a book drive, going down to the food bank, and having health and wellness programs. So we're really trying to expand our social outreach aspect of the program.
And then the remaining 3 pictures on the slide are kind of on the advertising aspect. So we made posters that we hung around the school. That's the bottom right. And then we made flyers for the donation drive bake sale. And then we also made some posts about just the St. Baldrick's Day program and on our Instagram.
All right, you guys are gonna have to wrap it up, so this is kind of your conclusion.
Yeah, so I think we've been really grateful to be able to achieve all of this in our school and get resources from our administration to make it possible. And I think our primary goal for next year is to ensure that we have more mentors, more tutors, and more students involved in the program. So kind of with that concept of how do we keep people, we realize the importance of instilling intrinsic motivation where people want to come by themselves, and we want to have an environment where individuality is valued, so everyone's sense of why of joining is channeled toward a singular objective, but everyone's identity and process of achieving the goals that we have in mind is not assimilated. So it's really not about the volunteer hours or writing this in your college resume, but we hope that we're able to change lives, and maybe in the process we learn more about our own lives. So we kind of see teaching as this way where we get to narrate a story and tell a little bit about how the world works, and in turn we get to witness how our students take this foundation and build something incredible out of it. So kind of to achieve this philosophy, we have some other ideas and philosophical concepts that we hope to apply, and they're all linked to books or talks, so you can feel free to access them. Because we're running out of time, we won't elaborate upon them for now. But thank you so much, everyone, for making the time to come to listen to our presentation. And if you have any suggestions or any questions, we would be more than happy to talk with you.
Yeah, so feel free to stay back after this session right now and ask us questions.
All right, thank you. I don't know if you guys have questions. We went over a little bit or anything you want to ask. There's a few people online. If they have any questions, we can ask, but I think we got to wrap it up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
There's anything? Okay. Well, Elizabeth, Rada, thank you guys for taking time out of your day. We appreciate it, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
You.
Also, before everyone drops off, there is a session code. So if you guys need to get your hours, you'll get that by going to the website and going to the Google Doc to get it. But the actual code,
Yeah. It's the code right there.
yeah, there's a code. It's attached to the Google Meet. Yeah, if you guys, I don't know if you guys can just share it. If you click on it, it should be able to come up as a doc, and you can just share it on the screen. The code is just, it's 6411 is the 4 digits. 6411, and you'll just go to conference.apps.sparc.org and find the live session, and it'll have the Google Doc there. You can enter that code and get your time for it.
Yeah, Rada, do you want to insert it?
The takeaways?
Yes.
Okay, do I just do end to get them?
There's this stuff that has everything. That
Do I
has
do end?
form link. That's where.
Yeah. Ask Mr. Holmes.
Do I do the end presentation to get the takeaways?
Yeah, you can do that. Right. I would name it. So SPARCC 2023. And then generate. Nope. Yep.